Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Show. I'm Martin Geisler. Coming up this morning, a new First Minister resets the Scottish Government. There will be a new way of doing things, we're told. But with just about everyone who was in Cabinet staying in Cabinet, has anything really changed? The Health Secretary, Neil Gray, will be here to tell us. And talking about new ways of doing things, it's 25 years to the day since the inaugural meeting of this Scottish Parliament. It promised new ways of doing things. But how's that turned out? The former First Minister, Henry McLeish, was there at the start. He's been telling us he'd like to see a new chapter written on the idea of devolution. And what about the smaller parties Holyrood was supposed to champion? Robin Harper became the UK's first elected Green politician in 1999, and Rosie Kane was one of 6 Scottish socialists voted in 4 years later. We'll be discussing whether our Parliament still delivers the politics we were promised. Yeah, thanks for your company this morning. There is loads to discuss, and the conversation is not just happening here in the studio, of course. It is, as ever, happening online on a Sunday morning. If you want to join in, the hashtag is BBC Sunday Show. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Well, that certainly seemed to be the case with the unveiling of the new First Minister's cabinet last week. Yes, Kate Forbes is back as Deputy First Minister and Economy Secretary, but pretty much everyone else who'd been in Humza Yousaf's cabinet returns in John Swinney's, albeit with the occasional bit of role tweaking. So, is this enough to address the many pressing issues we face at the moment? A struggling economy, an NHS that doctors say is in crisis, and an education system that is probably no longer the envy of the world. As with any party in power for 17 years, it's difficult to maintain momentum. So will this Scottish Government reset be enough to stimulate the drive and the creativity that's really needed if you want to effect meaningful change? Well, a little while ago, I spoke to the Health Secretary, Neil Gray, in a bid to find out. Neil Gray, the air is thick with talk of change this week. The papers are full of it today as well. Kate Forbes writing in the Sunday Times, promising an economic shake-up. Insiders speaking to the Sunday Herald, promising a bonfire of the vanity policies. It feels like the day after an election, this, and a new party in charge, and yet virtually nothing has actually changed. Why should we believe you're going to reset things?
So I think John Swinney's leadership is an opportunity for us to refocus, for us to make sure that we're focused in on the priorities of the people of Scotland. And that's what a minority government also does by making sure that we are reaching out across the Parliament and finding consensus. So it means that we need to make sure that we look at our policy prospectus and take forward those areas where we feel that we can achieve consensus. So I'm very pleased that the way John has started his tenure as First Minister, looking to reach out. It's meant that we've had a huge amount of positivity, both within the party, but I feel also within the country around the direction of travel and where we can go, what we can achieve. And I think Kate's article in the Times today sets that out, refocuses, re-emphasises some of the work that has been going on in the economy space, the incredible Sumitomo deal, which I was proud to help to achieve as Economy Secretary, £250 million worth of investment, really kickstarting that energy supply chain for a renewable sector and looking to do what we can to ensure we're supporting the business community in Scotland, all to deliver the well-being economy priorities of supporting public services. Okay. We've got a very clear vision for how we want to take Scotland forward.
Right. The fact that this has all changed suggests that it wasn't being done properly in the past. That's less easy to say when you're the government that's been in charge throughout. But let's speak about your brief now, health. How are you going to change that?
So, first of all, in terms of that first point of your question, I don't think it does mean that. I think it means that we are refocusing. We are ensuring that we are taking forward those areas we're already working on, but reprioritising them, making sure that we're finding consensus across the Parliament.
All right, there's nuance there. What about health?
In terms of health, I've already set out a paper to Cabinet setting out the national conversation that I wish to have with the people of Scotland, with staff, trade unions, expert academics, our other colleagues across Parliament around how we take our health service forward, how we reform and improve. And I'm hoping to be able to lead a debate in Parliament on that very topic, trying to seek consensus, find a common vision for what we want our NHS to achieve later this month so that we can drive forward that improvement and change that we need to see.
What's on the table in this conversation?
I'm relatively open to ideas as long as they don't cross the red lines that I have, but I think also the people of Scotland have around making sure that our NHS remains in public hands and that remains free at the point of use, at the point of delivery. Aside from that, I'm relatively pragmatic around what else we can do to make sure we drive that improvement and sustainability for our health service, make sure that we really capture the incredible work that has been done by our health and social care staff. On International Nurses Day, I must acknowledge the incredible work of our health and social care staff and ensure that we take forward the improvement and reform that is required so that we have a health and social care service that is fit for the future.
OK, but you're ruling out any private sector involvement, are you?
No, so I've said I don't believe that we can allow for the founding principle of free at the point of use, free at the point of delivery, nor can we allow for an NHS to not be publicly owned. Beyond that, I think there is incredible work being done on innovation and medical devices from the private sector and the academic sector that I want to harness, that I want to see come as a benefit to our health service and also our economy in Scotland, because there are many Scottish businesses and academics that are working on these improvements that can help ensure that our NHS moves forward. We can improve the care that's being given. That's very different from compromising on free at the point of use.
Sure, but the private sector, is it not a matter of fact that the private sector is propping up the NHS at the moment? I mean, we hear these tragic stories about people who are remortgaging or selling their houses or spending the kids' inheritance on a knee operation because they've been waiting years for it and they can't stand the pain anymore and they now have to go private. And that actually is the reality with waiting lists that are years long for many people, is it not? And without that private care, their pain would continue.
Well, first, there's a couple of points in there. First of all, we're investing to bring the longest waits down. The former First Minister made a very shrewd investment to bring forward £30 million, the first tranche of £100 million a year over the next 3 years to bring down the longest waits. We're investing that now, and we're seeing waiting times coming down. But I acknowledge that for too many people, they're waiting for too long to get the treatment that they need.
Cancer waiting times are going up.
No, we're seeing us very close to meeting the 31-day target. The 62-day target has been very difficult for us to achieve, but we are
going up every quarter, Mr. Gray. Every quarter it's going up.
And it remains a priority for us off the back of our cancer strategy to continue to invest in cancer services, and that will obviously be part of the work that we're doing from the investment that is coming and bringing down waiting times. Because, as I say, I acknowledge that for too many people, they are waiting for too long, and that is unacceptable, which is why we'll continue to take forward initiatives so that we can recover from the pandemic-related delays that we have seen. Initiatives such as the rapid cancer diagnostic services that have been piloted in health boards across Scotland, an incredible innovation that is meaning that we're capturing cancer earlier for those that have undescriptive symptoms that make it difficult to diagnose. This is making a real difference, and that is down to the incredible work of our clinicians across Scotland.
The BMA in Scotland put out a tweet within minutes of the Cabinet being confirmed this week. They said the reappointment of Neil Gray as Health Secretary is not only welcome but necessary. We need continuity at a time when the NHS in Scotland's in deep crisis. The issues of pay for consultants, specialist doctors and junior doctors and new direct investment for GP practices must be addressed. When they come to you and ask you for all that money, what are you going to say?
Well, I've already been having those conversations with not just the leadership of the BMA, but BMA committees as well, having those conversations about where we go around pay. I welcome the BMA's acknowledgement of my appointment and welcoming of my appointment. I want to continue working with the BMA, as I have been doing over the last 13 weeks, as the government has been doing over the last number of years.
Do you have money to give them when they ask you for a pay rise?
I'm coming to that. When we get to when we've had really strong, constructive relationship based on pragmatism, based on an honesty of where both sides sit. Now, of course, we're going to enter the pay negotiations when there is a public sector pay metric available across government to ensure that we have a sustainable pay offer for our incredible workforce. But of course, I want to do everything I can to make sure that for those working in our health service, whether it's those doctors, junior doctors, consultants, whether it's our Agenda for Change staff, making sure, or indeed any other staff working in our health and social care sector, I think it has been evidenced over the last number of years that we have done everything that we can to make sure our health service staff are the best paid in the UK, have the most competitive set of terms and conditions to ensure that we're attracting people to work here in our health service, and why we have record staffing levels across all disciplines in the health service.
I'm asking because at First Minister's Questions this week, we learned that your government is almost certainly going to have to scrap its promise to employ 3,500 new teachers because there isn't the money around because of the economic conditions in the country. I'm just wondering whether or not those economic issues will affect your ability to give the pay packages that these doctors want, and if they do, and if they can't get those pay packages, are we looking at more industrial action in the health service?
Well, first of all, the First Minister didn't say that we're going to scrap that.
No, but he was asked 3 or 4 times if you weren't going to scrap it, and he didn't say, and he didn't confirm that.
I get that.
He didn't give a straight answer.
No, because there is work to be done to make sure that we're assessing the challenging public sector finances across the public sector in Scotland. The government, our local government colleagues, the health boards that I am a custodian of, we're all facing incredibly straitened times, and that is because of a decade and a half of austerity and a reducing block grant that has come from Westminster.
Sure, they're the facts. I'm just asking you how far that impacts your ability to pay people the money they're going to ask you for.
Well, of course, if we were to see UK government, whether that be Tory or Labour, coming in and actually investing in our public services instead of running them down, we would have a greater capability of being able to make these investments that we all wish to make and wish to see. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be a reality. So we've got to enter the pay negotiations with our public sector workforce in good faith, recognising the challenges that they face because of the UK cost of living crisis, recognise the challenge that they face day to day, but also recognising the challenge that we face in making sure that the pay offers we make are sustainable, which is why we'll be coming forward with a public sector pay metric and enter negotiations as soon as possible. OK,
let me just ask you, in the time we've got left, the recommendations of the Cass review on the treatment of young people and gender identity, that obviously is going to fall under your watch, because what Dr Cass was saying is that these young people should be taken into the broader health service and not treated by specialists because they have varied and wide and complex needs in many cases. Are you going to do that in Scotland?
I'm very grateful to Dr Hilary Cass for her very substantive document, her evidence-based document, which we as a government welcomed. You will understand, and I'm sure Dr Cass will understand, that we're now reflecting upon her recommendations, which was, of course, commissioned by NHS England. There are different pathways in England as there are in Scotland, so we need to reflect upon the recommendations.
How long will you reflect for?
Well, we've given a commitment in the debate last week. Our amendment suggested that we would be responding before the summer recess, and that's something that I'm committed to.
Let me ask you then also on that subject about your new law banning conversion therapy. Are you going to go ahead with that? Because doctors have been telling Dr Cass that they fear prosecution if that law goes ahead, just for trying to help patients in their care.
The First Minister said, I think it was on Friday morning, that we are going to look at the consultation responses from the conversion therapy consultation and reflect upon them, but we are committed to continuing with that legislation because it's an important piece of legislation.
OK, well, last question to you. You are the kind of top stone in the pyramid in the NHS in Scotland. The buck stops with you and you're the decision maker. Are you going to lay out a framework for doctors that tells them exactly what they can, they should, they must do in this respect? Because they're confused at the moment and they're frightened because it's such a toxic and sensitive subject.
It is, and Dr Hilary Cass made that very statement that the polarised political and public discourse has not helped in terms of taking forward a very sensitive area of public health and medicine. And that's why I want to make sure that in responding to the Cass review, we do so in a measured, evidence-based way, recognising the challenges that there are there for those young people that wish to seek those services, but also for those medical professionals who are delivering those services, and making sure that families are properly supported in what is a very sensitive area of health policy.
OK, we will see what that means in the weeks ahead, I'm sure. Neil Gray, Health Secretary, thank you very much indeed for being with us on the Sunday Show this morning. Now, just time for a quick reminder that Wednesday night is debate night on the BBC Scotland channel. Here's Stephen Jardine with the details.
Debate Night is the only show in Scotland giving you the chance to put your questions to the people in power. Next week, we're going to be in Perth. If you want to come along and be in the audience and join us, head to the website, bbc.co.uk/debate night to apply. Debate Night, Wednesdays, 10:30 on BBC Scotland.
Yeah, if you like your politics and you're not watching Debate Night, you really want to sort that out. It is essential viewing on a Wednesday night. Now, 25 years ago today, the new Scottish Parliament held its first debate. Donald Dewar was First Minister, but less than 18 months later, he died and Henry McLeish took office. Governing in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, he introduced free personal care for the elderly and other things besides, before resigning in a row about office expenses. A lot's changed since then, of course. So how would he assess the state of our politics a quarter of a century post-devolution?
Well, there's no doubt that it was a significant sense of pride. I mean, we had been debating in Scotland and in Westminster the idea of devolution or decentralisation since the 1870s. So there was a great sense of pride, a great sense of place. And of course, I was pleased that I had taken part in the developments. And of course, it's interesting as well that May the 12th was the day 5 years earlier that John Smith had died, and John made an enormous contribution to the idea of devolution. And then, of course, Donald Dewar was magnificent in the House of Commons in making sure that what Scots had fought for, he made into a reality. But I also thought that cross-party, and that doesn't happen very often, there was a sense that this was history, a sense that Scotland was shifting. You know, and after 300 years of Westminster involvement, where there had been no real concession to Scotland, this was a day much to be remembered. In Westminster in 1996, the year before the Labour government, there's only 3 pieces of specific Scottish legislation being considered. Over the last 25 years, we've had 360 bills that have gone through. But it's also acted as a focus, and that's what it was intended, for Scottish public opinion. Over 2,000 petitions have been received. And of course, young people regard the Scottish Parliament now as their first parliament in terms of that age group. So no, a lot of positive aspects since then. And let's remember that it's 25 years. You know, Westminster was there for 300 years in that form. So 25 years gone, but I look forward very positively to what may happen in the next 30 years. And if there's one negative aspect of devolution, it has been that politics in Holyrood has remained toxic, it has remained tribal. And, you know, when I was in politics, we used to regard people as opponents. But now people have to be political enemies. And I regret the fact that this kind of grudge, grievance idea, the kind of revenge idea of politics is taking hold. Now, that must stop, no matter what the future of Scotland is. That's the appeal to all political parties. I want to see a new chapter written on the idea of devolution. Scotland currently isn't moving anywhere. Many areas of policy are being neglected. The people are more politically divided today than they were 25 years ago. And of course, independence is currently going nowhere. So my view is, let's give a revamp in a way and extend the idea of devolution. I think we should make it more attractive. I think we should make it more about the future. And I think if we were selling that politically, a lot of Scots would want to consider that. And of course, Scotland is divided in a way on independence. But the key thing is to provide an alternative to independence that Scots can actually be enthused and currently support. Recently, I've been thinking that in 1603, we had the Union of the Crowns. In 1707, the Union of the Parliaments. Now I think we need the Union of the Nations. That's the way forward, where Scotland could realise its potential. And of course, we need more reform at Westminster. That would be a great balance in which Scots, I think, would see success.
Well, that was the former First Minister Henry McLeish speaking to us just a little bit earlier. Now, the Scottish Parliament was designed to be very different to Westminster, of course. It was meant to champion smaller parties and make sure no one party could get a majority. In the early years, that seemed to be delivering. Labour governed with the Liberal Democrats. Robin Harper became the first elected Green politician in the UK. And in 2003, 6 Scottish Socialist MSPs were elected. And there were others too. Do you remember John Swinburne of the Scottish Senior Citizens Unity Party? And powerful independent voices, of course, like Margot MacDonald and Dennis Canavan. But in the years to follow, that changed. Whilst the Greens have thrived, the Scottish Socialists are no more in Parliament anyway. And in 2011, this supposed Parliament of the minorities delivered what it was designed not to do, a majority government in the shape of the SNP. Well, I'm pleased to say I'm joined now by 2 MSPs from those early days. Robin Harper, the former Scottish Green leader, of course, and Rosie Kane, who was one of those 6 Scottish Socialist Party MSPs elected in 2003. Good morning and welcome both to the Sunday Show.
Good morning.
Good to see you both again. So, Henry McLeish there with some really interesting analysis and thoughts on where we are now. Robin Harper, to you first. Has devolution delivered what we were promised? Henry says we need a reset, a way of getting back to where we were when you guys had your seats. Do you agree?
I think that in one sense he is very right that Scotland is divided 50-50, and it has been for the last 3 elections. If we got a majority for independence in the Parliament, it would be so narrow that the other half of Scotland's population would be very, very disappointed indeed. We've got to get away from that. I've been working for Gordon Brown and his group, Our Scottish Future. And the idea is for us to start getting away from this now really worn-out set of arguments that we keep chucking over the wall between the 2 sides and saying, what's the alternative? There is a third way, and that is to see how we could improve the UK rather than destroy it. At the moment, nobody's looking at the UK and saying, what can we do to improve the UK?
Rosie, we're talking, I mean, specifically on the Parliament itself and the absence of the smaller parties, for example. The electoral system hasn't changed. Why are we not seeing Scottish Socialists, for example, in the chamber?
I can only imagine that it's got a lot to do with what was happening at the time. So there was a big buzz around Parliament. It was new, it was fresh, it was exciting. Politics had come home. So there was a big buzz. We got the first 4 years out of the way. Second 4 years, a few other things were happening. The invasion of Iraq was happening. There was a lot of politics around environmental issues, road projects, and people were engaging really strongly with community politics. And I think that was the finest moment so far in our electoral system, where the public were engaging first-hand with activists and then putting them into Parliament. I had no intention of going to Parliament. I stood with the promise that I would not be elected, but I would go all the platforms, get to the hustings and everything else. But the public thought otherwise and thought, let's try this.
Yeah, I mean, environmental issues, Robin, have obviously entered the public consciousness, or right at the fore of the public consciousness, in a way that they weren't back then. That might explain the Greens thriving at the moment, although their politics is diversified as well. How do you think smaller parties should persuade people to vote for them once again? I mean, you've just got to look at the state of the roads to understand that the issues at the end of your street are really important to people now.
It's the same problem that faces all political parties. It's not peculiar to small parties. You've got to get your message across clearly, and when you are in a position to take that message forward, to make sure that you're doing things carefully and consulting the science, consulting with people, working with people, cooperating with people. This is just what the Greens have not been doing over the last couple of years, and I'm very disappointed that that has been the case. If they'd cooperated better, you would not have had the mess over the recycling. If they cooperated better, I think you wouldn't have had the mess over Section 35 being delivered to the GDR legislation they wanted to push through, and so on. There are so many examples.
They would say the Butte House Agreement was all about cooperation, though, wouldn't they?
Well, look what has happened.
Yeah, well, quite. Good point, well made. Rosie Kane, has devolution worked? Oh, it's a big question, but Henry McLeish is saying to an extent.
I'm going to say yes. because, again, I'll go back to bringing politics to the people. So way down in Westminster, far, far away, our representatives, it's not good, is it? You want it to be closer. Community councils, your city councils, and then ultimately your Scottish Parliament. So in that respect, yes, but I'm pro-independence, and so I would say one arm is tied behind the back. So we need to go further. It's a stepping stone, but it needs to go further for the Scottish Parliament to be effective and really, truly represent the people of Scotland.
And Robin, to you on just the running of the Parliament, there's no second chamber in Scotland. The committees were meant to take the place of that, do the work of a second chamber. Are they working?
If my experience of watching the gender recognition bill going through the committee stage, third stage, is anything to go by, the committee system is not working properly in the Scottish Parliament. It was dominated entirely by the government. 157 amendments were dealt with in 2 days, and only 4 or 5 of them were taken.
That's the setup we've got at Holyrood. How do you change that? How do you make the committee system better then?
Well, for a start, no committee should be chaired by a government member or a government party member. I think that would make a tremendous difference. Take a look at the Finance Committee. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they were as effective and feared as the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee down south? Nobody wants to appear before the PAC. You just have to watch it and you can see why. I've never heard any talk of the Finance Committee being anything other than just a little bit of a rubber stamping.
Do you think, Robin, as well, that there's a problem with some politicians are now in it for a career, for a big career, you know, to rise up through the ranks, as opposed to being in politics for the cause and for the people who voted for them. And so people are trying to make a name and make themselves very, very much shown to the media in order to step up that greasy pole, and instead of being there with the kind of passion that I feel that we took, like Margot MacDonald took, I mean, a shining star. So I think that's what's missing a wee bit too.
Let me ask you, Rosie, would you, if you were speaking to an idealistic young person who said, I want to get into politics, in a quick answer, in a sentence if you could, would you encourage them?
I've been asked this by young people who have said that, and I have said, tread very carefully and remain true to yourself, no matter what. Put your hand up against that tide. And Robin, what about you? Would you encourage people to get into politics these days?
I would. I was a modern studies teacher for 27 years. And what I said to my classes was, it doesn't matter what party I support. So being a Green Party supporter, you should get a pat on the head, you'll be all right. But you must speak up. Right. You must speak up.
OK, well, on that positive note, we will leave it. Thank you both for being with us this morning. Thank you all for your company here on the Sunday Show this morning. This is where I leave you. I'm back here, BBC One Scotland, Radio Scotland, 10 o'clock next Sunday. Join me then if you can. If you're with us on the radio, here's Andrew Black.